Iran has fired a direct ballistic missile strike at Udeid Air Base in Qatar, one of the largest and most critical American military installations on the planet. This is the command hub. This is where the United States orchestrates air operations across multiple countries and active fronts. Fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, refueling tankers, intelligence platforms, and advanced command centers that direct military activity across a vast region all flow through this single facility. Thousands of U.S. troops are based there, and Iran just targeted it with precision missiles. Iranian officials and state media are describing the strike as a major success. American and Qatari officials say air defenses intercepted several incoming missiles. One missile hit the base, damage was limited, and operations continue. Between those two competing narratives is a reality that is already reshaping the balance of power in the Middle East as you watch. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what Iran claims happened, what the United States is saying in response, why the gap between those two stories matters more than either one on its own, and why this single strike may have already changed the calculus of every government in the Gulf, regardless of how much concrete was actually destroyed. Imagine you have a security system guarding your most valuable property. You have spent billions on cameras, sensors, alarms, and rapid response teams. You have told everyone in the neighborhood your building is untouchable. Then one night, someone shoots directly at it. Maybe the system stops most of the attack. Maybe some debris ends up inside the fence. Maybe the physical damage is minor. But everyone on the street just watched somebody take the shot. And now every single neighbor is asking the same question. If they can hit that building, what does that mean for mine? Hold on to that thought, because that is exactly the question every Gulf state is asking right now about its own relationship with the U.S. military presence on its territory. Drop your answer in the comments. Does the strike on Al Udeid change the equation for countries hosting American bases, even if the damage on the ground was limited? Let us rewind. Al Udeid Air Base sits southwest of Doha in Qatar. It is not just another airfield. It is the central nervous system of American air power in the Middle East. From Al Udeid, the U.S. manages missions that span multiple countries and conflict zones simultaneously. The base hosts the Combined Air Operations Center, the CAOC, which coordinates and directs the full spectrum of American and coalition air operations across the region. Surveillance flights, combat sorties, aerial refueling, electronic warfare, and intelligence collection are all fused through this one command hub. For years, Iranian commanders have publicly warned that U.S. bases in the Gulf are within range of Iranian missiles and would be targeted in a major war. Western analysts have debated whether Iran had both the precision and the political will to actually strike a facility of this magnitude. The assumption in many defense circles was that hitting Al Udeid would be such a dramatic escalation that Iran would be deterred by the likely consequences. That assumption has now been put to the test. According to Iranian state media, this strike was not a mere signal. It was a calculated operation aimed at the strategic nerve center of America's military presence in the Gulf. The question is no longer whether Iran would ever target a facility this important. The question is, what happens now that it has? Receipt number 1. The Iranian claim of precision impact. According to Iranian officials, the strike on Al Udeid formed part of a broader retaliation campaign in the escalating confrontation involving Iran, the United States, and Israel. Iranian commanders say precision missiles were launched in a coordinated salvo aimed at critical military infrastructure on the base. State media outlets in Iran quickly pushed out statements asserting that missiles struck important sections of the installation. Some reports suggest operational areas were hit. Others say logistical facilities and support infrastructure took significant damage. Iranian military spokesmen present the operation as proof that American military assets in the region are vulnerable and that even heavily fortified bases fall within reach of Iranian missile forces. The narrative out of Tehran is crafted with care. Strategically, it is designed to say, we can reach and hurt the most protected U.S. facilities in the Middle East. Symbolically, it is meant to tell every government in the region that hosting American forces does not guarantee safety. It guarantees being on the target list. Whether the physical damage truly matches the rhetoric is almost secondary to that strategic signal. Receipt number 2. The American counter-narrative of limited damage. After hours of confusion, Washington responded. U.S. defense officials confirmed that missiles were indeed launched toward Al-Udeid. But their version of events diverged sharply from Tehran's. According to U.S. military sources, the air and missile defenses around the base successfully intercepted several incoming missiles. They acknowledged that a ballistic missile struck the base and that debris and fragments landed inside the perimeter. But they maintain that the damage was limited. The Pentagon has emphasized that Al-Udeid remains operational and that key facilities and command functions continue to run. For American commanders, that messaging serves a crucial purpose. Admitting some impact while stressing continuity sends a signal to allies and adversaries alike that U.S. military power in the region has not been decisively weakened. But here is what that narrative cannot erase. Precision missiles were launched at the most important American air base in the Middle East. One got through. The very fact that the Pentagon felt obligated to reassure the world that the base was still functioning tells you how seriously this strike was taken behind closed doors. You do not issue statements about operational continuity unless there was a credible threat that it might be disrupted. Receipt number 3. The gap between narratives and what it reveals. Iran is telling its public it delivered a devastating blow. The United States is telling its public and its partners that damage was minimal. Both narratives are doing strategic work. Iran gains by projecting strength. The U.S. gains by projecting resilience. But there is a truth that neither narrative spells out directly. A threshold has been crossed. Before this, striking Al-Udeid was theoretical, a talking point in Iranian speeches, and a scenario in Western war games. Now it is operational reality. Whether 5 missiles struck near the target or 50 were fired overall is less important than the fact that the decision to shoot was made, the missiles were launched, and at least one reached the base. That precedent does not rewind. It becomes the new baseline for every military planner, diplomat, and government in the region. If this breakdown is connecting dots you have not seen put together elsewhere, hit subscribe right now. This situation is changing by the hour, and you need to be here when the next escalation lands. Here is what most coverage is missing. There are 2 very different philosophies of power on display in this conflict, and the Al-Udeid strike makes the contrast painfully clear. Iran has spent decades pouring resources into one primary military capability: precision missiles. It did not try to match the U.S. in carriers, 5th-generation jets, or global deployment. It built the one tool that could hit American power where it is most concentrated: forward-deployed bases. That is asymmetric strategy executed over a generation. Iran identified the vulnerability, built the weapon, and waited for the right moment to show it. Now look at how the U.S. chose to posture itself. Thousands of troops concentrated in a handful of giant installations across the Gulf. Al-Udeid, Ali al-Salem, facilities in Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait. Each is a fixed target in a region where the adversary has spent 40 years developing missiles designed to destroy fixed targets. American planners have known about this vulnerability for years. The response was to invest heavily in missile defense and assume deterrence would hold. Deterrence just failed. Not necessarily because the interceptors failed, but because Iran concluded that the cost of striking the crown jewel base was acceptable. And once an adversary decides that shooting at your most important facility is a risk worth taking, the deterrence framework you have relied on needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. You do not fix that with a press release about continued operations. You fix it by rethinking the entire posture. And that rethink has consequences far beyond one base. So what does this actually mean for you? If you live in a country that hosts American forces, your government is right now rerunning the risk calculation of that relationship. Qatar suddenly finds itself at the center of one of the most dangerous geopolitical confrontations in decades. The base that was supposed to project security is now drawing fire. Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia are running the same numbers. If you work in or depend on energy markets, the implications are immediate. The Gulf is the heart of global oil exports, and any escalation involving missile strikes on military targets in oil-producing states sends shockwaves through prices and supply chains worldwide. If you are a U.S. taxpayer, the multi-billion-dollar missile defense architecture you funded is going through its most important real-world trial. And if you are part of a military family, your loved ones are stationed at bases that an adversary has now shown it is both willing and able to target. Once that line has been crossed, every other base looks relatively softer. Where does this go from here? I see three paths. Scenario 1, managed containment. Both sides keep up hardline rhetoric while quietly working to prevent further escalation against the highest value targets. Iran sells this as a major victory at home. The U.S. stresses that operations continue to calm allies. Back-channel diplomacy through players like Qatar or Oman sketches out informal red lines. The strike becomes a defining moment, but not the spark for a region-wide fire. Even in that best case, the precedent remains. Every future U.S.-Iran crisis will now factor in Al Udeid and every other Gulf base as realistic targets. Scenario 2, regional realignment. After watching missiles fired at a base on Qatari soil, Gulf states quietly begin to renegotiate the terms of the U.S. presence. Some could press for reductions or dispersal of forces. Others may look for supplementary security guarantees from other powers, especially China, which is already deeply embedded in Gulf energy and infrastructure. The U.S. base network that has defined the region's security order for decades might start to shrink, not through dramatic announcements, but through gradual erosion of host nation willingness to shoulder the risk. Scenario 3, escalation spiral. The U.S. responds militarily against Iranian launch sites in direct retaliation. Iran answers with additional missile salvos against Gulf bases or energy infrastructure. Each round of retaliation produces more damage, more casualties, and more pressure on Gulf governments to either pick a side or tell U.S. forces to leave. Energy markets spike violently. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz slows or halts. What began as a strike on one airbase becomes the trigger for a regional conflagration that reshapes energy flows, alliance systems, and the distribution of military power for a generation. This is the scenario nobody wants. But escalation spirals do not require intent. They only require that each side believes not responding is more dangerous than responding. Here's what you need to understand. Whatever the final damage picture at Al Udeid turns out to be, the strategic ground has already shifted. The belief that American bases in the Gulf were effectively shielded by a mix of advanced technology and deterrence has been punctured, not destroyed, but punctured. And in strategic competition, a punctured assumption can be almost as dangerous as a shattered one, because it forces everyone in the system to recalculate at once. Iran has shown it will fire at the most important American military facility in the region. The U.S. has shown its defenses can blunt, but not fully erase, the threat. Every Gulf state that hosts U.S. forces has just received a crystal-clear signal. Partnership with Washington now comes with a targeting overlay they did not fully price in. The base is still up. The missions are still launching. But the world that existed before those missiles were fired at Al Udeid is not the world that exists now. Did Iran prove that American power in the Gulf is vulnerable? Or did the U.S. prove that its defenses can take the hit? Is this the moment Gulf states start hedging away from Washington, or the moment they double down? And when the next wave of missiles comes, because in an escalation cycle there is always a next wave, will the defenses hold, or will the margin get thinner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe, because the next phase, the retaliation decisions, the Gulf state recalculations, the defense system reassessments, is unfolding right now. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away. This content is commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or geopolitical advice. Always consult qualified experts before making decisions based on the information presented here.